It's the fourth Sunday of Easter. And the fourth Sunday of Easter is always Good Shepherd Sunday. And every year, there are sheep everywhere. This year, they're especially thick. This morning, we heard two of the most familiar and beloved portions of Scripture, the 23rd Psalm. And that piece of John's Gospel where Jesus tells us, I am the Good Shepherd. For centuries, this image of Jesus as the Good Shepherd and of us, his followers as the sheep, has been for various reasons deeply meaningful and moving to many, many, many people. The sheer volume of stained glass, canvas, music, poetry that's been inspired by this vision of Jesus as the Good Shepherd is unbelievable. And the number of sermons, articles, hymns, retreats, and meditations concentrating on that image of Jesus are probably well beyond imagining. So it's with great fear and trembling that any preacher wanders into this specific pasture and looks these particular bully creatures in the face. And like all things to do with livestock, you have to watch where you step. We've all heard talks and sermons and read devotions and inspirational works that focus on the work of the shepherd. How alien that work is to us here in the 21st century. And I'm sure you've all heard a number of sermons talking about the pros and cons of being a sheep. They're loyal but dumb, cute but smelly, all that kind of stuff. Still, in all the words I've read and heard on the subject of the Good Shepherd and his sheep, there's one thing about all of this that I've never heard anyone talk about. It has to do with a pretty simple little question. Why in heaven's name do shepherds keep sheep to begin with? Do you ever think about that? I did. And after I thought about it for a while, I came to the conclusion that shepherds keep sheep for pretty much the same reason that ranchers keep cows, that farmers grow cotton, and that white-haired guy from Kentucky keeps chickens. You see, being a shepherd and caring for sheep, and for that matter, being a sheep and following a shepherd, has to, sooner or later, have something to do with wool and mutton, right? There's just no getting around it. And that very practical little reality of sheep keeping never shows up in stained glass windows, and hardly ever makes it to a statue made by the Franklin Mint. But keep these two things in mind: wool and meat. It's a bit disconcerting, isn't it? It's a bit frightening. This is the third time I've preached this sermon this morning, and every time I've gotten to the part about wool and meat, just about half the congregation went. It's not the sweet, sentimental notion we generally associate with Jesus as a good shepherd. They're everywhere, these sentimental little schlocky pictures of Jesus. In fact, I saw one that was posted on Facebook by another Episcopal priest from Massachusetts. He posted a number of them, but this one in particular, I kid you not, had Jesus as the shepherd, cradling a lamb like a little baby in the moonlight. Romantic and creepy all at the same time. But in a sense, if all of this thinking about why sheep in the first place, it's kind of reassuring when you get to the bottom of it. After all, one of the big problems with this whole shepherd and sheep business, as popular as it is that sheep have a reputation as being passive, stupid, insipid, docile, and dull. So if we're the sheep of the Lord's pasture, does that mean that we're like sheep? Just hanging around, occasionally getting lost, whole point of the story that we aren't worth very much and that we're not very capable? I don't think so. Remember, shepherds don't keep sheep as pets. They're not much fun to have in the living room anyway. Instead, there are reasons for the whole sheep-keeping enterprise and expectations for everyone concerned in that enterprise. The sheep are useful. They're important. They're necessary. If the sheep don't produce, then the shepherd's in big trouble. Nowadays, lost revenue, failing business, first century, starving family. Which brings us back to wool and meat. This is the piece of the Good Shepherd business that's about us. It's about our part of what's going on with this familiar and comfortable talk about green pastures and still waters. The Lord expects things of us. And if we don't come through, well, there's not really a contingency plan. But don't get me wrong, we have to tread carefully here. We have to make sure that we keep all of these things straight. The point is not that there's some fine print on Jesus' promise to be the Good Shepherd, or that he's only a good shepherd for the most useful of the sheep. Jesus isn't going to leave us to the wolves or turn us into glue or dog food or whatever it is they do with useless sheep if we don't produce. The Lord cares for us and has blessed us. He laid down his life for us. That sacrifice, that love, that continued care, those are all free gifts of the grace of God. They're given without condition and without exception. We don't do stuff in the hopes that God will be nicer to us or love us more. There is no more. God is love. By his very nature, he is incapable of loving us any more than he already does. Nonetheless, there are expectations. There's this business of wool and meat. The care that the Lord offers us is intended to lead to something real and something substantial. We're supposed to produce. We're supposed to give back from who we are, from what we can do, from whatever our situation in life is, from our various skills, abilities, resources, and gifts. We don't grow wool. It's not our nature. But it is our nature to worship and to serve, to reach out and to share, to study and to pray, to increase in holiness and to tell the truth, to seek for justice and to be willing to sacrifice. It's in our nature to choose to grow in a disciplined and steady way into the fullness of the stature of the person of Jesus Christ. And to do this in community and with integrity. That is what is expected of us. Now, this isn't about church work. It's not just about coming to church on Sunday morning or being part of a committee, although that can be part of what's expected of us. No, instead, what I'm talking about is the work of the church. It's about living. It's about life. It's about being. Our call to risk, to sacrifice is not only with our lives, but with the years and days that make up our lives. Have you ever seen the famous etching called Praying Hands by Albrecht Dürer? Most of us would recognize it if we saw it. I think most of us had a grandparent hanging on a wall somewhere He was one of 18 children. Yes, 18 children. His father was a goldsmith. And though he worked hard at his trade of goldsmithing, sometimes for 18 or 20 hours a day, he also worked at every odd-paying job he could find, just to keep enough food on the table to keep his family fed. And both Albrecht, who we know, and his unknown until now brother Albert, both showed a lot of promise as artists. They were both very talented. But they knew that there was absolutely no way that they could both go off to Nuremberg, to the academy, to study art. So the brothers made a pact. They decided they would flip a coin, and whoever won the coin toss would go to Nuremberg and study art for 4 years. The brother who lost the coin toss would stay behind and go to work in the mines to help finance that education. The plan was that once the one had graduated, he would either by selling his artwork, if he was good enough, or by himself going to work in the mines, finance the education of the remaining brother. They made the coin flip one day after church, and the lot fell on Albert. So off Albert went to Nuremberg to study art at the academy, and Albert down into the mines to help pay for that education. But Albert was an instant success, a very talented man, and after his graduation, he was commissioned almost immediately for huge sums of money for his work. And at a festive dinner to celebrate his graduation and his return home, Albert held up a glass of wine, looked down the table to his brother Albert, and said, "Now, my beloved brother, you can go to Nuremberg, and I will take care of you." But Albert sat there with tears streaming down his face. He looked up and said, "No, brother, I can't go to Nuremberg. It's too late." He said, Look what 4 years in the mines have done to my hands. The bones in every finger have been smashed at least once. And lately, I've been suffering with such bad arthritis pain in my right hand that I can't even lift up a glass to return your toast, much less make delicate lines with pen or brush on parchment or canvas. No. It's too late for me. So years later, to pay homage to the brother who had literally sacrificed everything to give him his start in the art world, Albert sketched those hands of his brother Albert, and he etched them. Those hands that had worked so hard in those two lines. And he called this powerful drawing Hands. But it wasn't long before the entire world immediately opened their hearts to this and recognized this great masterpiece for the tribute of love that it really was, and began calling it the Praying Hands, which is what we still call it today. The kind of love that our Good Shepherd calls us to costs. And it can cost a lot. Don't forget, wool and meat. At the same time, don't forget that this also means that each and every sheep has purpose and value and worth, and that each and every sheep is important. Each and every one of us, each and every one of you can contribute. In fact, is called to contribute in one way or another to the mission of the church, can't be too young or too old or too new or too sick, too ordinary or too unqualified or too ornery or too busy or too anything to avoid the reality of wool and meat. We are needed. Each and every one of us is needed. And without us, without any single one of us, the mission and work of the Lord and his church is made vastly poor. We matter, and things are expected of us. We aren't pets, kept for our owner's amusement. We are valuable assets. One of the many truths of the biblical story that this culture that we live in is eager to forget is that there's no such thing as being chosen for privilege. We're not chosen, picked out, protected by Jesus, our Good Shepherd, for the sake of our own comfort and convenience, or for our personal needs, or so that we have an easy life. Nobody in the Bible was chosen for that kind of life. Instead, God's care and protection are always given so that we can be better equipped for service to one another and for service to the world in which we live. It always means something special. Something more is expected of us. Don't get me wrong. To be sure, Jesus is the Good Shepherd. He paid the price and protects us and cares for us. That's just the way it is. But remember that there's more to it than that. We are valuable and important. And we have an essential role